Good afternoon. And today I thought we'll take a little walk down to the first official park of Gateshead. So let's begin. We're into a park called Windmill Hills. And to most people this is just a peaceful corner of Gateshead, quiet place for a walk with dogs and that, and some of the best views of the Tyne. It feels like it's been here forever, a simple, unassuming patch of green in a busy town. But what have I told you, this ordinary park was once a strategic high ground in a war that tore Britain apart. This calm green space was once a bustling hub of industry, its sky filled with wooden machines long before the factories of the Industrial Revolution ever fired up. The park has a secret history, a story of war, of industry, and a community that claimed this land for its own. Today we are going to uncover this extraordinary past hidden right under our feet. To really get to know this place, we have to rewind way back before the battles of buildings. We need to go back to when this was simply known as Gateshead Hill. The name Windmill Hills doesn't pop up on record till 1436, but for centuries before that this was all common land. There was no buildings or anything, it was just green open land. That meant it didn't belong to any one person. It was shared resource for the people of Gateshead, a place to graze animals, to gather things, an open space right on the edge of a growing medieval town. The idea that the land belonged to everybody is the first and maybe most important layer of its history. It's a thread that runs all the way to the present day. And it's this status as an open high up space that would centuries later make it so important. Its height and exposure position gives it a panoramic view of Newcastle and the river, and that set it on a path to a much more dramatic future, first as a site for industry and then as a theatre of war. In the 17th century, Britain was ripped apart by the wars of the Three Kingdoms. It included this English Civil War, and right here on this peaceful hill, that national conflict played out in a very real way. Because of its height, as you can see, Windmill Hills was a perfect strategic spot. Anyone who held this hill had a commanding view of the river and the bridge, a key crossing point between England and Scotland. And in 1640, during the Second Bishops' War that led up the main civil war, the Scottish commander General Alexander Leslie set up his camp right here on Gateshead Hill after the Battle of New Burnford, which I'd done an earlier video on, and I'll put a description in the link below. This kicked off the Scottish Army's occupation of Newcastle, but the real drama came 4 years later in 1644 during a long, brutal siege of Royalist-held Newcastle. The Scottish Army had driven a garrison from the hill and started the main siege that allowed the besieged forces tighten their grip on the town. From this newly won high ground they could look directly down on a fortified city. Now, while historical accounts mention Scottish artillery being set up along a bankhead, there's no archaeological proof of any major earthworks right here on the hill itself. It is more likely cannons were spread out over the high ground, and there's probably one or two cannons here and some further down the Tyne Valley. And probably at least one battery would have been here. And after the soldiers packed up and peace returned, the very thing that made the hill a military asset, its high windy position, gave it a brand new purpose. The wheel was a source of power, and so Windmill Hill entered its industrial age. From the 17th century, the landscape was transformed. It's no exaggeration to say Gateshead was a major milling centre in the region, and these hills were at the heart of it. At their peak, these hills were studded with corn mills, which, seen at a distance, impart a lively picturesque effect to the landscape. A famous engraving from the mid-1800s show as many as 7 windmills right here. They were mostly post windmills with big wooden bodies that could be turned to face the wind, sitting on top of sturdy stone or brick roundhouses. This wasn't some quiet rural scene, this was proper industry. The air would have been filled with the creaks and groans of timber and the grinding of the millstones, turning the wheat into flour. It was a place of work, a vital local economy. Some of the mills' roundhouses were even converted into homes for the millers and their families. But the age of wind power couldn't last forever, as the Industrial Revolution brought steam power and more efficient technology. The windmills of Gateshead slowly fell silent, and by 1890 all of the town's mills had closed. For decades their silent frames remained on the skyline like skeletons of a forgotten era. But in 1927 the newspaper reported that the demolition of the very last old windmill on the hill, bringing a chapter of history that gave the place its name, to a close. Even while the windmills were still turning, the hills had become something else. They shifted from an industrial site to a public park. It wasn't a single event, it happened slowly, naturally, because it had always been open land. People were just drawn to it, as they still are today. During the 18th and 19th century, Windmill Hills became Gateshead's unofficial outdoor community centre. It was used as an exercise ground for local military. The drills, a faint, slight, less dramatic echo of the Civil War battles fought here. And more importantly, it became a place for fun. It was famous for its Whitsuntide hoppings, big fairs with stalls, games and entertainment. It hosted wrestling matches. This was where the people of Gateshead came to celebrate, to argue and to just get away from the increasingly crowded industrial town below. This period is so important because it shows the community staking its claim. The hills weren't just for industry anymore, they were for the people. This deep public connection built a powerful case that the land should be protected and preserved for everyone forever. The seeds of the public park had been sown long before anyone made it official. So we've gone from medieval common ground to a Civil War high ground, and then to an industrial powerhouse. And the biggest change was still on its way. If you're enjoying uncovering Gateshead's hidden history, do us a favour, hit that subscribe button and hit that like button, and also hit that notification bell. It really helps other people to find these stories. Gateshead was booming. New housing started creeping up the sides of the hills, with terraces appearing on the western slopes from 1858. The open space that everybody had taken for granted for centuries was suddenly at risk. In response, a movement started. Local people who knew how important the green lung was began pushing for it to be protected. The pressure led to a huge decision. The sources vary slightly. Windmill Hills was formerly made a public park between 1859 and 1861, securing its title as Gateshead's very first public park. This was a landmark moment. In an age of heavy industry, sprawling cities, the town leaders and its people chose to save a historic landscape. It was in recognition that this green space wasn't a luxury but a necessity. While the Grand Saltwell Park opened in 1876, would later become the town's big Victorian People Park, Windmill Hills was the pioneer. It set the precedent that a place with so much history and community values was worth saving for everyone. The creation of the park marked the final and maybe the most significant layer of the story of Windmill Hills. It guaranteed that this place, which had served the public in so many ways for over 500 years, would keep doing that. And that brings us full circle back to the park we see today. The cannons are gone, the windmills have vanished, but the echoes of the past are still here if you know where to look. The shape of the land itself tells a story. When you walk these paths, you tread the same high ground that soldiers fought over. The incredible views of the Tyne is still a strategic panorama that General Leslie's army surveyed back in 1640. And they are more deliberate reminders. Standing proudly in the park is a modern 10-metre high steel sculpture called Wind Vane. It is a direct nod to the windmills that once defined this hill, linking us to the industrial heritage that gave the park its name. The sculpture, even inspired by designs from local school children, continued the park's legacy as a place for the community. Even the statue of George Hawke, Gateshead's first mayor, speaks to the park's civic importance. After his death, a monument was erected in his honour and was placed in the park in 1865. So this isn't just a random patch of grass, it's a landscape woven into the very fabric of Gateshead identity. Every path, every viewpoint connects to the present, a deep and complicated past. And to keep the community, the building that is just through them trees there is Windmill Hills, where last was a care home, but originally started as a school for the less privileged working children. That I've done a video on it, I'll put a link down below. So next time you take a walk through Windmill Hills, remember what's beneath your feet. This is so much more than a park. It's a medieval common, a 17th century military position, and an 18th century industrial zone. And it is also a 19th century pleasure garden. Symbol of our landscape for a shared community, a place of work and a place of pleasure and leisure, can transform throughout the centuries. It's a reminder how even the most ordinary looking place can hold secrets and history that was once here. So if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and if you put in the comments if you heard or know about the histories of Windmill Hills. I'm always interested to read them, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.